me see here. I guess I would need to do is maybe share my screen perhaps. Would that be
Yeah,
good to
that
take?
would be perfect. Yeah. Sorry,
Alrighty,
I'm just
let's go
responding to people who
ahead.
haven't got the links for some reason.
No problem. Alrighty. So here we are. I'm hoping that my screen is showing. Okay.
Yes,
Already.
it's all showing well. Yeah.
Good. So this actually, what I'm going to be doing is showing some slides, which is based on this very popular ebook that we created about a year and a half ago or so, which ended up actually becoming a full-blown course on education.microsoft.com. So you could literally take this as a course on education.microsoft.com and get certified. And today, you know, it's a pretty long slide deck. It's over 100-something slides. I'm going to be skimming through a lot of it pretty quickly. Some of them I'm going to skip because I want to focus on the general practices. So, you know, this is called a non-designer's guide to creating visually captivating presentations. Now, let's look at the reality of it. Majority of people out there are not designers. You know, I am a designer myself. I'm self-taught. I've been doing this for many, many years, but 98% of the population out there have really no basic understanding of design.
Exactly.
Most people don't. Some do, the thing they do, but a lot of times they don't. So, you know, now the way that we go about this is that in terms of creating presentations with, let me see if my page link here works. There we go. Okay, good. Today, you know, if you look at traditional presentation making, you know, and we're all guilty of it in one aspect or another, is that people create presentations as if it's a document. They treat it like it is something you're supposed to read through. You know, I've seen it firsthand many times over. And this mistake is made in our tool and many others. You know, you can give people guidelines, but at the end of the day, they make the decision. So when you create presentations, you have to think of it as a visual guide. So today, you know, we use this term visual slides for visual age. And why do we do that? And why do we say that? Because today, you have to think of presentations as a new mechanism to provide or tell your stories. So 80%, now here's the thing, you want to say things visually. It's a term that we use. If you want to write a very long document that is going to be abstract or a thesis, by all means, it's going to be text heavy traditionally, right? Maybe hundreds of pages long, and it goes deep into things. Today, people are inundated with information left and right. And if you think about it, most often, you know, we are on an average day, and I guess you could say is that a lot of people don't watch necessarily TV as much, at least in the US, you watch Netflix and, you know, YouTube and so on. But
it's the same.
Facebook, yeah. So there's visual mechanisms. There's a lot of content that is delivered to you on a daily basis. You know, so let's look back the last 24 hours. What do you actually remember? You know, I tend to, and pretty much 80% of the people on average, tend to remember things that were more visual. So you may remember an image of an ad, a snippet, a sound, audio, but a lot of times it has to do with certain elements that are visual. You're not going to remember a paragraph of text. So that's the same way you want to think of it, is that when you're creating presentations, think of the big picture, think of how you can communicate to people in the most efficient manner. And the efficient manner is actually with visual cues, okay? So there's a saying that people recall around 80% of what they see. And again, these numbers are rounded, right? And about 20% of what they read and about 10% of what they hear. So again, you know, you're talking about 80% of information is absorbed visually. So the future of presentations, which actually is today, you know, you have the best success if you combine or actually in a way create graphics, right, which is a combination of text and images and sound, in this case, you know, sound and video. So if you create presentations that utilize in one way or another a combination of these, you're going to have a better, more efficient way of communicating with your audience versus, let's say, it's just, you know, a completely bullet point set of slides all over the place. Okay, if you look at the slide that I'm going over, by the way, in almost every slide there is some sort of a visual cue. You know, so this slide here could have just said the future presentations, and all this text could have just been a few bullet points going from the left to the right. So even though this is pretty text heavy, this is actually not light. It's a little bit on the edge. You know, your focal point automatically, of course, the very big title, big black, that's the goal of it. And again, you could also, some people read from left and right, or most of us do, but you may initially look at the graphical element here. And of course, you're probably going to focus on the quote here. And then maybe last, you're going to read through. The fact of the matter is that most people will not actually read this verbatim, text, line by line.
No.
And so, that's their supporting mechanisms. And you're really going to grab people's attention in the slide here. And this information, is not something that people are going to read through. So when you're presenting to people, they're really not paying attention to this. Okay, they should be paying attention to you.
Cool.
But there's 3 legs of a good presentation. I like to, in this case, this is a stool with 3 legs on it. I mean, I could think of it as as baking, or let's say cooking. So when if I have some guests coming over to serve a meal that people would maybe, let's say, most impressed with, or they walk away remembering, it's going to be composed of 3 elements. The content, which could be, in essence, is the ingredients you're going to cook with, right? The visual design, pretty much is the end result that you create. That would be the taste, as I call it. And then the delivery is like the presentation, how well it's coordinated on this plate and how pretty it looks and so on, right? Yep. When it comes to presentations, the content is kind of the story you're telling, the text, right? The visual design is what it looks like. So that's what I'm looking at here. And the delivery is really also how effective of a presenter you are, because you could have the most beautiful looking presentation and it may hit on both content and visual design, but the delivery could be very poor, and that's the way you're presenting things, and of course it's going to fail. So you need all 3 elements to be able to have an effective presentation. Now we go back to what is your message. Again, going back to the top, before you create a presentation or tell a story, you got to think about the messaging itself. So now this bottom of the second half of the slide here that you're looking at, it's kind of like the way a story is set. So you compare it to movies or a book, or even a story that is read in schools. And so at the end of the day, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. So the presentation is not much different. And, you are telling a story. Maybe it's a sales presentation. You're still going to have a beginning, middle, and end. Yep. Maybe it's for an internal communication piece. You're going to have a beginning, middle, and end. So regardless of it, the principles are the same, regardless of what medium that you're going to be presenting in. And this holds true for presentations. This will hold true for a story, a multi-page document. It's got an intro, body, and a conclusion, right? So similar thing goes here. I'm not going to touch too deeply on these, but if you look at it, there is a little bit of an up and down. So, one of the important parts about telling stories is that if it's just linear the entire time, you're just going at this same tone vibe, it gets boring very quickly. So you have to focus also on being able to kind of take your audience through a journey, and that's what we're talking about here. Okay. Now, how to brainstorm, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I mean, a lot of times, most people, when they start creating a presentation, the first thing they do, they go on slide 1 of a PowerPoint or Visme or any other document. Yep. The first thing they do is they jump on and they write their title and they start, focusing on the content of slide 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's really not the most effective way of doing it. So what you want to do is just step back. Maybe don't even open the document itself. Just in paper, whether it's a notepad, whether it's notes on your computer. Just brainstorm some ideas. Just focus on what is it I'm talking about, what is the sections, the categories, what is the beginning, the middle, end, what is the messaging. So that's what you want to try, right? Before you even create your first slide, you at least have that basis down. Second is, who is your audience? What is the audience persona? I mean, if I'm creating a presentation internally for my team, the way that I'm going to be, talking, or the way I'm going to be presenting, or the way I'm going to be using messaging and so on is going to be very different. Let's say if this was a external presentation for sales or for marketing, right? So you got to know your audience. And of course, often, the demographics, what is the goals and challenges that that audience might be having, and how can you help them? So these are items that you want to tackle. So that is very important, that when you are creating a presentation or telling a story, always put yourself in the place of the viewer or the person that is going to be listening to you. And you want to speak their language. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Create an audience. Yeah, so create an audience journey map, right? And here, just briefly, going through these real quick, the lay of the land, do we agree on a destination? Where are we now? Where are we going? There's a roadmap, the route that you're going to be taking, the very first step that you take, and that's, of course, where the journey begins. It's the very beginning. The next steps, of course, a follow-up, and this could be a kind of recurring multiple steps. You almost get there and then you arrive. So what you're doing is you're taking the user from the very beginning to the end of the story. And so that's kind of the goal here, is to, teach certain insights and abilities with your audience. There's a certain level of expectation that your audience have when you're talking to them and presenting to them. Look, I mean, you are taking their precious time. Time is very expensive. It's probably the most expensive commodity we have.
Exactly.
And so, the more of it they feel like you're wasting, which typically most people in a matter of a few minutes, they'll make that decision. In most presentations, they go to sleep, is if you're not connecting with them. And then as you go through, if you don't continue to take them through that journey, and they need to feel that they're getting some value out of that. If you cannot do that, you're not going to be having an effective presentation. Okay. So the similar here, as far as recommending a new action or solution. Again, in this case, we're talking about having a certain pitch. We're not talking about a pitch deck. We're talking about actual pitch, the story of it, right? And you are taking them again through that journey. So the wind up, the hurdle, the vision, all the way through the options that you're going to present, the closing statement, the ending, and of course, the fine print is, your audience is excited. We cover the detail of how we make it happen. And there has to be a hook in every story. There has to be a hook in every presentation. You want to have a hook. The hook is where they get a benefit. Now, although the hook is kind of explained here at the very end, if you're doing this as a sales presentation or marketing, you actually want to think about the hook right here at the very beginning, right? Because you're going to start losing them. So, or at least you want to have some mentions or some introduction here of what that hook is going to be, and then later on keep them all the way, keep them warmed up, and then close it here. Okay, so let's go through a couple more slides here and go through here. Okay, so the hook, the meat, and the payoff, which actually goes back to the last slide I was just talking about, right? What is the hook? I mean, that's basically a way to give the audience something that they are there to walk away with something. They're going to get some benefit out of that, and you want to keep them under seats. Then they're willing to actually listen to you a little bit more. They need to be able to understand you, and they need to be able to remember you, and there has to be a payoff, right? The call to action invites the audience to participate. So, let's say you are doing a webinar. We're doing one right now, but let's just, in general, there's a live demo going on, and you are demoing a product or solution you're offering. Let's say you're running a consulting service, right? And the payoff at the end is they need to think about that there's some value that your product or your service is going to provide to them, so that they're willing to actually take that next step, and they're willing to actually perhaps pay for it or even try it, and so on. Okay, so that's what we're talking about here. There is a main idea, which we go back to the message, right? It starts with that message, and the details, if you look here, you got the main idea, and then you have the details here sitting apart. So again, going back to when you're creating a presentation, which is a mistake people make, is they jump right onto it. They actually start by not having a brainstorming session or putting things down on paper, they jump into the details. If you start here and you're trying to find the details, you're gonna have to keep going back, and you lose the whole focus of what the idea was to begin with. So that's what this chart, in a way, this diagram is showing you. That what this is going to be, and of course, your main idea needs to be something that you can explain in just a matter of a couple sentences. Okay, like the main idea of this presentation is how to create captivating presentations. Yeah, so right there, you know what it is, and the rest of it, all these little fine details, are things that come on as you progress through the rest
guys,
of it.
if you have any questions as we're going through today, do feel free to ask. I've got the live stream up and monitoring now, and we've shot the emails out to all of those people who registered one more time with the links, because it seems Zoom ate the emails today that reminded people to come here. So by all means, jump on board, ask us questions. We're definitely here to answer those as well throughout the journey. But the one thing that I'm seeing in amongst all of this is there's no death by PowerPoint. Uh,
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be. I mean, death by PowerPoint. Let's talk about the hat is out of the cat is out of the hat.
yeah, I've
You
been
know,
talking about death by PowerPoint for the last
yeah,
3 days straight with course creators. So
yeah. It's not. The tool is only good as the user itself. So
exactly.
you got to have the basic principles, and there are some beautiful presentations, as I mentioned, made, and some great stories, and a lot of deals have been closed by using PowerPoint,
Yep.
Visme, Prezi, Keynote, and all those other tools, right? So it does come down to the person, and then also some terrible have been made with each one.
Yeah.
So the mechanism is there, but you have to be able to utilize that. So I don't think it's necessarily like death by PowerPoint, which is why a lot of people say, right? It's more about how you're telling a story
Yes.
and putting
Core
it together.
context.
It's kind of like saying, for example, death by short films, right? Well,
Yes.
there's a lot of great short films out there and do a fantastic job versus other ones that just maybe may not be worthy of watching. Slide design made easy. So let's talk about that. At the end of the day, you are creating slides and presentations, in general, let's say PowerPoint are linear presentation tools. And so, how do you, we were talking about content so far, now how do you create presentations, documents that are visual? They are easy to understand. We already talked about the advantages of having visual content. And so in this case, introducing those elements into a presentation itself. So you want to think about it when you're creating a presentation, you are not creating a document. A document is a very text-heavy component that you want people to focus and read through, and it's like a book and a story, right? But presentations are not meant to be that. They're meant to just kind of grab your attention and let you, the individual that's presenting, do the talking. And so the visual elements are very important in the presentation. So let's talk about that. Handle text like a designer. So we could talk a lot about that, but I think I'm not going to go into too many details, but let's look at it this way. The title of the presentation or the header of your slide should be the larger text. Example right here. A lot of times people, bold is actually your friend. Using the word bold and large text can be a friend for a header. So tip number one, if you're not even a designer, make your header pretty large and make it bold and keep it simple. It doesn't need to be 3 sentences long. See how short this is? It's just 4 words, right? With an A in it.
Sticks in the brain a lot better if it's shorter.
Yeah. And so that's one element, right? And also the use of the fonts that they utilize, typography. Yes. By default, Times New Roman. Everybody wants to create, that's the default font, or maybe now they've changed it on PowerPoint. There's serif fonts and there's sans serif fonts. Sans serif fonts, which is what you see here, it doesn't have those little edges. It typically looks pretty pretty, so you could just, stick to that over, let's say, using serif fonts like Times New Roman and so on. And that kind of, if you're not a designer, that will right there give you a little bit further across. Okay. And large text. So large text, headers large, and your text as far as the body content, short. And if you look at it, look at the wrapping. This text is not starting here and it's not going all the way to the right.
Yeah.
It's wrapped. And so we're using visual cues on the left. And sometimes you can take important statements, although this is a quote, that could have been a statement from here. For example, a number of important design choices that will affect the way your viewers perceive and process your message. That could have been a quote here. Where you take the top message and you can put it there. And so that will be one way. What's done is there's a 1 column, 2 columns, and 3 columns. You could do a single column and a second column too. But the point of it is you are being respectful of the width of the amount of the content or the text that people would typically read. Okay, let's go to the next one. So leading, very important. Look at this. The text is literally, the line height is reduced. And if we come down here, there's some introduction of space between the lines. It's a little bit easier to understand.
Yep.
And then also there's a little bit too much leading here, right? So which one of these can you more easily read? This looks like it's very hard to read, although they're all the same. They're all the same statement. So this is the right way, right? There's not just too much and not too little, a small little balance between the two, just enough that you feel welcome to wanting to read that.
Millie's asked a good question,
Sure.
especially when it comes to designing content. We might already be coming up to it anyway. But about graphics versus photos, is it okay to use both, or should you stick to just one when you're creating
It's a
those
great
presentations?
question. You can so you can use both, but here's the great point. I would say photos in general are good to maybe use as a background, maybe a title of your message, and it could be let's go back here. So let's say that you don't have access to all these icons. By the way, this presentation in general is using a lot of icons and graphics,
Yep.
right? It's just the way it was designed. And photos, people tend to overdo it. They feel like in every single slide,
Oh, yes.
there has to be a photo. You don't have to, right? You can create, in fact, there's some beautiful presentations created with just very simple, elegant elements that don't involve photos. If you do use a photo, make sure that, unless it actually completely adheres and is connected to the slide, let it be an abstract image. Maybe it's a desert put in here, and it's talking about Handle Texas like a designer. It has nothing to do with it, but sand dune or something that just appeals to that. It looks nice, but at the same time, it shouldn't be overtaking that. So we'd have to look at examples, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But long story short, there isn't a rule that says don't use images, only use graphics. Don't use graphics, only use images. Or at the same time, hey, can I use graphics and or icons and images at the same time? You can, but there has to be a balance between them. Okay. So let's go a little bit further. We talked about fonts, right? Talking about serif and sans serif fonts. So we talked about it a little bit. And again, by the way, there's hundreds of beautiful fonts out there. Like in our tool, Visme, we give you over 120 fonts. So you have all the different options that you want. You can even upload your own fonts if you have very specific branding requirements. In PowerPoint, you get a selected number of fonts. You can always go to Google, Google Fonts and be able to find a lot of fonts out there, and then you can install those and utilize them. So there's some pretty ones out there. Okay, so this Rubik is a great font, and there's a bunch of other ones out there. Okay, so let's look at pairing fonts. That's another thing. A lot of times people do not understand how to pair fonts. So let's say we're talking about Microsoft days, Comic Sans, heavily used, not the prettyest font of all. But the pairing of fonts, can, cause certain issues. If you look at it, these are actually two different typefaces. So the recommendation is use fonts from the same typeface. So here's a before and here's a after. You see they're both sans serif. They're around the similar typefaces. Two different fonts, but similar typeface. Okay. Stick to, no more than 2 or 3 fonts. I would say 2, maximum 3. If you're a non-designer, just stick with 2 fonts. Don't even worry about a third one. Okay, and that's very simple. And the same thing goes with colors. We'll talk about it a little bit. Again, this one, if you look at assign distinct roles to each font. So here's the after, and you clearly see that there's a big distinction between the left and the right. And if you look at it here, these are actually all sans serif fonts. So again, here's serif font, serif font. Again,
you're making my team very, very happy with all the mentions of sans serif fonts this morning.
Yeah. So, and by the way, it doesn't mean that
we're very biased, but
it's not that don't ever use sans fonts. In fact, if you have very long documents, reading, book and so on, often you'll see that there's sans fonts, right? So those can be. But if you're talking about very short snippets of text and so on, and if you don't have, unless you're a professional designer, you're going to have a tough time figuring out which sans font is going to work. So go with the sans serif. Okay. Alrighty, so let's keep going. There's a bunch of things here. I'm going to skip over some of these. As I mentioned, it's a very long slide, but avoid
you mentioned
similar.
This is an ebook. Is it something that I can put into our replay for our members to download? So
absolutely, I'm going to be sending you a link and a couple of links in a little bit. I will definitely put that. They can download this, and I think it would be great for them.
I think everyone's gonna love it. So there you go, guys. Yeah. So just in case anyone's like madly trying to snap photos of screens.
That's right. That's why I'm going to be skipping through a lot of slides because really that there's a lot of depth here. And in fact, when you download the ebook, you can read it in one session because as you see, it's a lot of graphical. There's not a lot of content, but it should be a great reference to every time you want to create your next presentation. Just refer back to it, and that would allow you to have better connectivity.
Beautiful. So for those of you who are rushing off early to go and check out Visme, there is a special offer for you at the end. I know you guys, there you go. Hang on, I signed up, but I didn't take the offer. We'll just wait. There is a special offer, so wait to the end.
Absolutely. And I have a little nugget that I'm going to drop in at the end too that I don't think I've even mentioned to you. So you're going to like
Ooh, this is exciting.
this. Yeah, we have early access to a new version of ISME. That's going to blow everybody away. So that's coming. You can get on the early access ahead of other people that are going to be getting in the coming
Heads up to accounts team, you will no longer see me
months.
for a meeting today. I'll be off playing with that.
Good. So how to use images like a pro. So avoid stock photos. What? Where am I going to get photos from? Here's the thing. There's a lot of great sources out there. There's a lot of great photos out there, but most people, they're talking about business, they go after handshakes. You see right there, too overdone. The smiling, everybody's smiling, sitting in a meeting room, and they're just, and those things are just so overdone. You might as well just avoid using them. And that would be the tip. So, try to avoid stock photos unless you have photos that are very appealing to the content that you're creating or their representation of it. Types of images. So abstract is a word that I think is great. So you could always utilize abstract. People in general in stock photos are always smiling, laughing, or handshakes. Those are easy to make mistakes on. They don't end up usually coming out great. So there are a few different types of images that you can do, and depending on the visual theme, you want to kind of select images that kind of illustrating a concept itself. Okay, abstract images, which I talked to you about a few times before. So let's look at this example, right? D&D 2016 7 key takeaways. If this image was not there, the average non-designer is probably going to try to look for the word takeaways, and try to find an image that has to specifically do with takeaways. It might be a coupon where you don't need to do that. This is a completely abstract photo, and it actually works great. It's beautiful. It's very simple. It serves as a background. Same thing with here, right? So that is some of the, what I'm trying to hear is that use of images does not have to be very specific. It's more of an abstract. And if you look at it, in each of these is actually serving as the background of the slide itself. Okay, real life images, those are great. You could use, and again, if it makes sense, again, background is used. Illustrative concepts, so it's an apple cut in half. It could be black and white. This one's blurred out. Beautiful photo here, the power up network. That's a ripple, so it's a representation of it, but it's not a very specific. Comfort zone. People think of comfort zone, think of a couch. It's not a couch. It's very, elemental here. Humorous images, that's just an example. The bats are actually dancing. No, they're really sleeping upside down. So again, you can have a little fun with it. Talking about evocative images, powerful images that actually really connect. So in this case, carbon budget running out, only 3 decades left. So the smokestacks here are a strong representation of that. Okay. Full screen images, this kind of goes back to what I mentioned as a background, right? So again, if you do use full screen images, it should work with the context of the contrast of the text or the content that's in front of it. So obviously you wouldn't probably put a black text here with that image in the background because then there's not enough contrast. So that's another item is contrast in design in general. You wouldn't put very light gray text that's hard to read over white text, but you would probably put a very light text, text over, let's say, a dark background, right? Because there is enough contrast. There is enough contrast here where I can easily read this and it works great over a background. I also wouldn't put like a neon red or yellow that would look terrible over this background. So there is very simplicity done, okay? And let's look at this slide on the left. This is what most people do. They stick an image in a corner and they put a text on the right, and look how, kind of unprofessional this looks, right? 1980s PowerPoint slide. Here,
and overwhelming. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, and in fact, it's the same elements. All it is white, full scale image. Here, you can see the representation of it, okay? Alrighty, so partial bleed images. Yes, so bleeds when an image touches the corner. And again, this is a bleed here. You see this little icon here? It's not just floating here, it's actually going over. That can actually do magic for design. And then here in this case, same thing. Now, there is actually cropping done. This image, if you look at it, it's about halfway cut off. So almost half of it is really residing here. It's completely cut off. And what it's doing is you're able to take your text, put it on one location, put the small text under it, left justify it, and then put the image on the right side. Okay, another example. Okay, so ideal size of images. So this is, oh, I guess we're talking about PowerPoint and Visme. In Visme, when you create presentations, automatically by default, although you can set whatever size you want if you wanted to, our presentations by default are HD quality. So they're 1366 by 768. And so, you know, it gives you, and the dimension is almost like a HD. So 16 by 9 resolution, 16 by 9 aspect ratio. So that's what you get. PowerPoint starting to do that. You could do that, but you know, the traditional PowerPoint is 4 by 3. So necessarily HD quality, right? Alrighty, don't distort images. And if you ever size your image, make sure that you size it proportionally. And there's this little, you know, key on your keyboard called the shift key. Hold on a shift and then use your mouse to drag that photo, and that will proportionally increase or reduce the size of the image. Do not just squeeze it down left or right. This is what you end up with. Terrible. Always make sure you utilize the.
And there's pain for everyone.
Yeah, that's right. We're talking about, you know, use one image per slide. You can, you know, but if you do that, have some sort of this is a tile. You see there's a line I could draw down. I could draw a line up here. There is this balance between it versus here, this just randomly. You see this image is touching each other. These two are touching. The spacing is off. You got to be very consistent. It's kind of like laying tiles in a kitchen, right? Or in a bathroom. Everything has to have the same pad around. Okay. Cropping images. We talked about that before. So if you look at it here, you're focusing on the focal point. You know, you're not going to focus on this person's head. You're going to focus here, and that's what is done in there. Okay. All right, tigers, one of my favorite animals. Again, cropping, right? You are focusing on the animal here, and you have plenty of white space, as I would call it. It's not really white space, but it's an imaginary space that is. Yeah, so that is there. Okay. Combine text with images. So that was another question. Again, you can do a lot of beautiful stuff, but you have to select the right image. If you look at all these images, there's always some empty space that allows you to put your content. So when you're searching for images, you want to kind of focus on that. Where is it that I'm going to be able to put my text on? Now, there was some examples I showed you before where there was, you know, a ocean, water, or you know, forest and so on. If you use those images, make sure that the text you put over it is still readable and legible. Okay. Blurry images. So again, that can also work sometimes as a background, not as a image that you place. Okay. Images with elements, similar. Again, you can see each of these. There's a certain element to it. All right. Travel and style. Again, talking about more, you know, creating visual balance. So this is the balance here. You have empty space and you're utilizing that. Notice that the text is right justified because you're against the right side. One of the tips would be anytime your text gets too close to the edge, just justify it to that corner. So here is left is okay because there's plenty of space here. You know, although we're saying don't, because you see the problem is this text is touching the compass. You could move it down here, but as you do it, then you do the right justification. Okay. All right, unbalanced versus balance. Again, that's another example here. Let's keep going. Let me go over a couple things here. Okay, let me go to the next section. There's a lot of examples here. All right, ditch the bullet points. So PowerPoint, full of bullet points. And let's talk about colors, right? You know, how do you know what colors to use? So again, you have to go to the ebook. It gives you some very cool, easy to understand ways to you know, to be able to decide. Yeah, so this is just telling you about the color, emotional aspect of color, right? So, you know, purple can convey royalty, luxury, wisdom versus black, power, sophistication. So that gives you a little bit of understanding the colors you can utilize. Now, combining colors is very important, right? So that is the mistake, one of the common mistakes that people make. By the way, I did a video some time ago. We have a very popular YouTube channel. You can literally go on YouTube and just type in Visme, V-I-S-M-E, and we have a YouTube channel. And there's a lot of non-Visme specific videos there that have nothing to do with the tool, but have to do with design. So like there's one of the tools that I did, the videos that were done was 19 design mistakes made by non-designers, talks about color, contrast, some of the things that we're talking about here. A lot of great videos up there that talk about those. Combining colors, so you know, stick with warm colors. It's recommended if you're a non-designer. And then, so cool colors, you're getting a little bit towards this part of it. Complementary colors. I highly recommend, this is a slide that you take a screenshot of it, or of course download the ebook, and of course you can always Google this too. This allows you and shows you how to select complementary colors. And again, there's a lot of color palettes out there. In fact, today there's so much out there. You can Google complementary colors and then just literally use those colors in your design. You don't have to go around and try to create your own balance between it. Okay. And again, this goes a little bit further as far as, you know, how to split complementary colors. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is talking about how you can actually be able to go selecting different colors. And again, we're going to skip over these. There's a lot of different things, but colors.
I can see everyone having a great weekend of reading or a great afternoon of reading.
Yeah. This covers all the way. I mean, you could be a pro,
awesome.
But I don't want you to be, for those that are listening, you don't have to be, you know, too scared and wow, there's way too much going on here and so on. You just need to pick up on a few different elements, which is what I'm trying to focus on. Is just, you know, a little bit on the images and the fonts. That's all you need to know as a starting point.
If you take even just 2 tips from this, guys, you will see your presentations increase if you just take, you know, the simplicity. And most of the things that I see as a PR and marketing coach is overloaded PowerPoints, overloaded content.
That's right. That's right. And then, and let's go back to another tip here. Nobody made a rule that says your presentation must only be 5 slides or 10 slides. It could be 60 slides. I mean, what I'm doing right now is I'm just going through things. You see, I'm not spending a lot of time. That's the whole point of it, is to just be able to skim through it and just, you know, you're not going to grab every piece of information. You're focusing on the key rules. 60, 30, 10 rule. So that's about having balance. You know, so 3 colors and 60% of the space should be towards the primary color. So let's say that you have 3 colors, you know, in your design. You actually don't want to go over 3 colors in your presentation. Just think on that. Creating a presentation, what is the 3 colors? Is a primary color. So majority of that is used here, 60%, and around 30% are secondary, and 10% will be for the third color, tertiary color, and that's usually the accent. This is the accent here, you see? That's the accent color here. And that's, and I'll show you when I go to other slides in this presentation, that's actually our own pitch deck, and you'll see that. Okay, spread content out.
I'm just going to move you over to Clive being a host for a moment. For some reason, the battery on my main tablet, which I normally present from, is doing. So I'm going to move you over to him being the host. I'm going to go and step into his computer in his office.
No problem.
Gotta love it, the joys of technology when things happen. So I'm just going to make him the host for a while, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that will mean that
you won't connect.
And I will be, I'm not going to disconnect. This computer's still going to be running. I'm just going to turn the video and everything off and go and join him in the other office. The joys of technology today. It's just, for some reason, does not want to play with me.
No problem.
Unmute the start video. There we go. Okay, I should be back in here on his computer. There we go.
I hear you fine. So we're going to keeping going will be how to use video presentation, right? So that's an element that a lot of times people skip. You don't have to force it, but it can actually serve as a good balance of having, again, it is considered visual, right? Keeping the clips short, shouldn't be too long. You want to use authentic videos. And you could also use a video as a background. So in Visme, people actually do is they will put a video in, because you can embed a video from Vimeo or YouTube without even have to uploading it, and then you can just make it really big and put it behind all your objects and just let it autoplay. And so when you load up the header, the first slide of your presentation, you got this video playing with your message on the front. So that's something that you can do.
Definitely one of the features I've used a lot.
Yeah, or you can actually, just to support the messaging and so on, you can utilize videos when it makes sense. Okay. What should you use the videos for? As I mentioned, it could be used as the cover itself. It could be used to support testimonials, case studies, interviews, event videos, behind the scene videos. Typically, though, this is more for self-serving presentations. If you're in front of an audience presenting, most of these videos, excuse me, don't really make sense, right? So it's more for if you're sending a presentation off to someone to view it, they will be able to watch it on their own at their own pace. Okay. So this is an example from one of the number of this video has been used in Seth Godin's seminars, or actually the keynote speeches that he's done, and he's used this example a number of times as a video that actually always gets people laughing and so on. So that again is something that he's used, and so that kind of gives an example that it can be a good supporting message. How to create effective charts. So then again, Visme, our tool, PowerPoint, others, there's charting tools that allows you to relay information in a more or content as a data in this case in a more meaningful manner. So that's what basically charts are for. But again, people can go really wrong with charts as well. So let's look at an example here. Make your key points stand out. It's really all about these two, right? It's not about all these elements here. It's here. And if you look at it, what's going on? There is when do people buy on our website versus here. So we look at the setup, right? You're summarizing everything here. Percentage of sales, and that's where here. It's and the time of the day. Way too much information. 0, 10, all the way to 100%. 12 a.m. to 3. Just get it down to the least amount of information to let that through. And if you look at it, look on the left. It might take you 3 to 4 times the amount of time to understand what that says versus here, just a matter of a fraction. So that's what you want to always shoot for. Less is more is what you want to do, okay? So here again, push all the chart elements to the background, and there's not even a grid in this case, right? So we're taking, again, some of the elements that don't have to be there and just utilizing it. And see, it's student loans. We are talking about, in this case, student loans is what I talk about. So everything else is pushed to the background. In this case, it just become gray because that is what you're focusing on. Here, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Which one is the student loans? You have to go here and look at it as a reference point when all you want to do is to focus on that element, right? So here's a bunch of examples I'm going to show you here. Again, these will be in the ebook, but just to give you some examples, again, before and after. Try to get rid of chart grid lines and borders. I'm not saying don't ever do it, but they don't always serve a positive purpose. Here, it could be a pie chart, but again, using the by stacked format allows you to more easily understand it. So what we've done is we've taken away these elements and we're using it here. Types of diagrams, again, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. For flow charts, event diagrams, concentric, circular charts, sunburst charts, there's a bunch of different examples. Again, this ebook goes through a lot of different examples. I'm going to skip over these allegories. Putting it all together, right? And now that you've understood some of the basic principles of it, how do we get this all together? How do we put a nice, effective, captivating presentation? You want to create some visual hierarchy. And there's a whole video we've done on YouTube, free for everybody to watch, about the principles of visual hierarchy. So I highly recommend that video. Again, you can Google it, Visme visual hierarchy on YouTube, and you'll be able to find that video.
I'll pop it in the webinar replay as well.
Sure. Sizing objects according to importance. We talked about headers should be large, and then because they get prominence, and then there's small text. But in this case, we're talking about numbers sometimes, or data, right? So 79% is the most important number here. That's what you focus on. It's the first thing you see. And then you have the secondary element. So think about what is the object that you want most people to view. So here's the other thing. Every time you go through your slide, think and ask yourself, in 3 to 5 seconds, this is what I want people to walk through. If they were to see this slide for 3 or 5 seconds and that's it, what is the one thing that I want them to make sure they walk away with? Focus on that. Make that be the largest, most prominent element. Okay. Create an illusion of depth. Again, is going a little bit more about hierarchy principles. Skipping over a little bit. Use contrast to attract viewers' eyes. So we talked about contrast, right? Yellow, yellow, and there's contrast against the background. Contrast, this is a background that's very dark, and this white and yellow text easily stands over that. That's kind of what we're talking about here. So contrast, again, is a very important principle. Just think of it as the opposites. If I have a black background, I'm going to use white text or light gray or yellow. If I have white text, I'm going to use very dark text, maybe dark purple or black, dark gray. Okay. Use alignment to direct the user's eye. So we're talking about alignment here. In fact, it's left justified, although it's centered, but there is a certain appreciation of the alignment here. Here, we're using some leading and size of the fonts to get everything into this nice, clean format. Okay. All right, let's go into, so going back to this one, all right. How is the slide drawing your viewers' attention to, we want it to be to the woman and then the text. So if I go here, people read from left to right, she's on the left, and then there's a messaging on the right.
Yeah.
Okay. Rule of thirds, to create a focal point. So these are examples of rule of thirds here, okay? And it allows you to kind of improve the balance of the composition of your slide. So, it's not a principle that you have to follow in every design, but it's something I actually personally struggle with rule of thirds a lot, because it's one of it can be tricky to understand in essence, but once you get it, it really allows you to kind of achieve some balance within your slides. But again, you don't have to try to follow this in every single slide. Negative space to emphasize elements. We talked about it a number of times. Look at all the empty space here. You have the left, and then your eye goes here. So although this text is not very large, you do still see it because it's a very clean, empty area, and you have no choice but to do that. People don't look at a white space. They focus on what is there, okay? Same thing here. Empty space, you kind of follow this line here, okay? Same thing. So creating content in a coherent design, okay? You want to create certain associations between elements. Examples here, numbers and their stats. And so that's what we're talking about here. You can create, a visual connection through closure. There's just enough information here. And over here, all the information is provided, too much information missing. So it has to do with the balance. You see, what's happened is we've taken the image, and we've got the focal point, some white space, and there is the content over there, okay?
Awesome.
Repeated elements to tie your designs together. Great example, look. This thing has been following me everywhere that I've gone. It's a repeated element that you're following. It's not overtaking a page, but it's just an element that's there. Why is that even there? It's just to add some continuity between the slides versus just a white, very empty slide. Okay, so that's kind of an example they can do. Another part will be all these icons, they have a similar feel. Okay, in Visme, we actually have the ability where when you go to grab icons, they're all categorized into outline, I believe flat. We actually have isometric coming out. So you make sure that the slides that you're using, that the icons that you're using, they all follow through. When we're talking about images versus graphics, make sure that if you're using graphics, icons in your design throughout your slide, they all have a similar favorite. You don't go swapping between a single color and an outline and a fill. All these icons follow through. So if you look at this example, they're all very similar style of icon. Same thing here. Okay. Proximity to group similar objects. So if you look here, we're talking about these two pet robots. So there's a certain proximity between them, and that's what we're doing, utilizing here. So you're basically placing objects near each other in proximity to each other, to the relation.
Yeah.
I don't think actually this is the best example, to be honest. There's some better examples, but just kind of, approach it as similar elements near each other. All right, transitions and animation. That's something that Visme really excels on, is the ability that you can, in one click, have your entire slide animate it, and without you having to animate any objects. You could if you wanted to, but it's just fully. So you literally right click on a slide, apply a transition, and boom, apply to all your slides, and you can have a zoom effect transition. So that's what we're talking about here.
I do love that.
Yeah, start with your final slide and work backwards. This is actually pretty interesting, right?
Yep.
So, you look at what you have at the end and work your way up. Again, this is all after you've established your brainstorming session of putting the structure of your presentation together. Create scenes instead of isolated slides. So again, think of the, you could look at it as, or people call it categories or subsections of the presentation. So you could approach it that way, as a scene that is comprised of individual slides, and maybe there's a 5 or 10 slide session and you focus on that. Okay. Animations to make a point. So, it also needs to have a purpose, just because, it's great to have transitions between slides. It kind of continues through and looks nice if it's clean, but you don't have to force the animation just for the heck of it, right? It needs to have some purpose as well. So in this case, it is kind of drawing the line itself, so it allows you to follow through the end result, the messaging. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, so delivery. That's what we're talking about here. We talked about how to deliver an unforgettable presentation. We talked about content. We're talking about the visual design of it. Now we're talking about the actual delivery itself, right? So a successful talk is a little miracle. People see the world differently afterwards. That's from Chris Anderson, TED Curator. You want to immerse your audience in a story. This kind of goes back to what we talked about. And, telling a great story, even sometimes you could literally have a very poorly designed presentation and the story itself could still captivate an audience. Of course, it's more effective when you have visuals to support that, right? But the story and the way that you tell it is extremely important. Put an emotional aspect to it, get personal. Here's what I used to face. Here's a challenge I used to face. And here's I solve it. Associate people with the story that you're telling them. That always brings them closer together. Okay, they want to feel connected with you. Create some suspense. Yeah, there's an up and there's a down and there's a climax. So you want to approach it that way. Similar with pretty much every great movie that you've seen. Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorite movies of all time. There's a number of areas that it's a very slow moving, kind of a movie in essence. It's very long, but there is areas of suspense and down and then climax. So bring the character to life. Again, these are all going back to, some of the elements that we're talking about here. Again, if you're a non-designer, you might have a little more challenge with this one. But again, the story, this is all about the story, not so much the design of the presentation. Okay, show them, don't just tell them. Going back, if your presentation with the visual cues, whether it's video, graphics, images, can support the story that you were telling them, that further builds that up. Because remember, they might hear the story, but if they can connect it to the actual visual, it's going to be more memorable that way. Okay. And end with a positive takeaway. So we talked about that. What is it that you're going to end with? What is it they're going to walk away with? What is the message? What is the end result? And that basically takes you through that. So there we go. Ditch the bullet points, start creating stunning visual presentations. And there we go. Okay. And actually, oh, by the way, this ebook was made in Visme. I forgot to tell you that. Yeah. So this whole thing was done. In fact, there's an interactive version of it, but it's a PDF that I'm actually going through right now. And I'm going to share a couple of links before I forget. I guess we can put that in there.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Let's see. There's one. If I can remember, the make presentations. Okay, if I can remember the URL. If not, I will send that to you a little bit later. Okay.
For those watching the live stream, I'll come back and pop these links straight into the live stream very shortly.
Got it. So here's one. I'm going to put this in the chat for anyone that's listening in.
Yeah.
Go here. I guess I'll put it. Where we go with the chat.
Down the bottom, just under the menu.
There we go. Sorry, there we go. I use them all the time, but so this is the ebook to download, and then also Visme has a brand new version that's coming out, and it's called Visme Unleashed. It will take interactivity and the end result of your presentations to a whole new level. and you can actually go there and get early access. So you can register, get early access to the new version of Visme. You won't be getting in right away. We are letting people in groups, and so you will be one of the early access people, users, ahead of the rest of the community. So that would be also a link we're taking. You can, of course, go in and check out the existing Visme, play with it as great as it is, but this new version also will allow you to do things a little bit more that you've not been able to do before, not just in Visme, but other tools as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. Do you want to give it guys a tour, or are we going to leave them come in and have a bit of a play at early access and maybe come back with a new skills webinar next year when we've got that to give them a walkthrough?
Yeah, that probably will be a good idea, because once I get started, I can spend 30, 40 minutes on it. I don't want to bore your audience with it.
No. We'll come back and we'll do an expert session on Visme next year and really take them through a tour, because I'm content creators, course guys.
We can get into the early access at that point as well.
Yeah, that sounds great, guys. And look, you were able to take a look at it. Now, Payman did set up a message, and I don't have the coupon for it, but there was an offer for our members to get a 25% discount if they wanted to look at it today.
Sure.
I don't have the coupon code for that one with me at the moment, but we will get that through to you all in the replay options as well. Sign up for the early access, guys. Do take a look at the existing Visme. If you've got a presentation that you do need to get done, it's a really good time to get that done and get that started. Thank you for joining us today. It will be awesome to get in and have a play with early access. So I've already started filling details in on that one. We're starting to get everyone moving in the right direction from there. Guys, thank you for joining us for another Small Business Skills webinar. We will be back sometime next year, very early, when Payman's ready to show us the insides and outs of Visme, so that you can, take what you've learned today. We'll put the ebook in download on their website for you. The replay will be up on download for the website. So if there's someone you think that should have watched today's skills webinar, please send them this way so that they can get in there and see the skills webinar. Now, I don't have all the links that I do need to have normally set up for us, but we do have one more webinar left for the year, based on the Business Life Planner, and based on all of that information and the requests coming out through the group. Clive is going to come and run a webinar for you all on planning and setting your goals for 2020. So that one is set for, gee, I don't even know. I'll popping the link in for you to register for that one now. That one is actually set for, when are we? The 11th of December. So that's the 11th of December. You can come in and do a planning session with Clive after the ball. For those of our members who are attending the Business Ball, I'm looking forward to seeing you on Friday night, and definitely having a drink or two to celebrate the end of the year, because it has been huge. And Payman, thank you once again for joining us. Thank you for coming and showing us, how we can create impact with presentations. And I say thank you for myself for reinforcing some of the stuff that I have just been going on about for the last couple of days. And guys, please forgive me for my disjointed version of this presentation and proposal this morning. I am rather sleep deprived after 3 days of delivering workshops, but I will be back and ready to be excited and chatting for the ball. And apart from that, after next week's webinar, Clive runs, we'll take a break, and we'll be back in January with more skills webinars to help you boost your business. Until the meantime, jump into the Facebook group, say hi. Payman, are you a member of the Facebook group yet? Are you a member of the BBB Facebook group?
I don't know if I am, actually. If you could
You're going to have to get in there.
Yeah,
the Business Facebook group. Jump in. I went on the replay. I'll send you an invite. And I'll tag Payman on the replay. Great. So if you've got any questions from today, he can come and answer them exactly there for you, and you can have some fun from there. Thanks for joining us.
Sounds great.
Go home, see your family.
Thank you very much. All right.
Have a great night, everyone. Have a great night and have a great day, everyone else. See you guys. Bye.
Thank you. See you.